It's my honor and pleasure to welcome to Bach Talk my good friend Brett Bachus. Brett, we've known each other since what the Clyburn in the latter half of the last century or something. I think is that true?
Well, that's when I first heard you play, but that was on TV. I don't think I actually met you at that point. Played the Mozart B flat concerto with the Austin Symphony, and that was when I actually met you face to face.
Brett is a wonderful pianist and scholar, and we recently convened for weekly Zoom calls over the course of the pandemic, really, and it was enormously enlightening. It was through Brett that I met our mutual friend Sophia Gilmson, with whom I've also spent numerous hours. Brett and I had many conversations with Sophia over the last couple of years, sometimes just us on our own, and especially as I was starting to get my obsessive mitts into the well-tempered clavier, I really started getting into the nitty gritty of notation, and it was one of those days that Brett started talking about his concept of the dot. It took a turn where I really felt it was necessary to try and document it as best as I could. Right? Yeah, it goes here too. Yeah. So that's all to say. I've been looking forward to this moment, just subconsciously, I guess, because I never had this idea of doing Bach talk with my friends and colleagues. But the idea of giving Brett the floor and getting him to recount, I mean, this just one part of his massive and comprehensive scholarship and original scholarly thought in terms of musical notation and history. So it's fascinating to have you on, Brett, and I will and but the good news is with the notes, uh, if you get off topic, or if you miss one of the major points, I'm here to hold your feet to the fire. So best of luck, but don't slip up.
I had a student, an adult student. The question that she asked me was, what do all the little dots do? The way the question had been asked was, what does this dot do? Or what does this dot mean? So instead of trying to explain the one dot, I got to explain all of the dots. I came across a couple of dots that I didn't know the answer to, and of course that bothers me. So it took me about 3 days to figure it out, putting together of information and connecting dots, so to speak, to come up with the solution. I couldn't find anything that was written to solidify what I thought or what I had the conclusion that I had come to. But it does follow logic, and it does make reasonable sense to believe that I'm accurate.
Anything to tell you that you're right.
Well, thank you. I think I'm right. There are some things that I think are revelatory about the way the dots work. Dots have a fascinating ability, a simple concept that is applied in multiple ways. The dot, when it is placed above or below a note head, is that it means half of the value. In Baroque rhythms, they don't necessarily mean half.
I was most curious with actually the historical foundation, the dot and its significance.
So there is a wonderful book called Shady Characters by Keith Houston, and he actually goes into great detail about all of the different punctuation marks. In this book is also the beginnings of the dot, which was the main reason why I wanted to buy this book. That and another symbol called the octothorpe. The octothorpe is in almost exactly the same shape as our sharp sign, but according to him, they are not even remotely related to each other. So Aristophanes of Byzantium was first to give readers some room to breathe when he created a system of marks for augmenting texts written according to the rules of classical rhetoric, which was 3rd century BC. He was a librarian of the Great Institute at Alexandria.
Well, and as we know, there have been several instances, in particular in the Well-Tempered Clavier, that Bach has noted his invoking of several different facets of rhetoric.
Yes.
So this is something that was definitely on his mind.
Yes, and also the writing in ancient Greece had what they called an ox trail, where it would go this way and then this way. It was a single succession of letters. There were no breaks in between words or at the end of sentences. So what he did was he created a system of three dots: a high dot, a middle dot, and a low dot. And all of these were about the different types of pauses that were to be taken. And of course, they have turned into other symbols that we still use today. The
Ringing the
apostrophe,
bell, yeah. So tell me, bring me through those.
the apostrophe, and uh, the colon, the semicolon, and the of course the comma, and and then the period. These were very good at separating things. And it's the separation that is what we use in music. That is the way that the dots are applied, with the concept of half being added to this idea of separation, and then the concept of half for extending came
The
afterward.
evolution of the punctuation is fascinating. I'm also interested in how we came up with this idea of medieval symbolism for this
Right.
set of dots. I think this goes into the question of how the dots are related to clefs, and so not about separation but designation and notation.
Right. Now, those symbols that you just held up are actually the precursor to our time signatures. That these symbols came before we used numbers, and they started off with four symbols, which is the sun sign. If you look up sun sign on Google, you'll get the circle with the dot in the middle. Then the circle without the dot in the middle, the half circle with the dot, and then the half circle without the dot. All of these are relating not only ancient Egypt symbols, but also there is a lot of Christian symbology is applied to the concept as well. There's also numerology applied to these aspects, because the the circle by itself represents the idea of perfection, and in numerology, the number three is perfect. If you look up the word perfect in the dictionary, you will get the definition of complete in every way. Two is imperfect because it's less than three. Two is also the number of mankind. One is the universe. So in Christian symbology, the idea of two being less than perfect also equates with the Christian idea of sin. So of threes, and you have groups of twos. And they have another word, prolation, which is what we use our word subdivision. So you're dividing each group into groups. And with the perfect circle and the dot also representing perfect, you have three groups of three notes.
So like
So
a 9/8 or a 9/9/4, or what have you. Yeah.
yes, and if you take the dot out of the middle, then you have three groups of two. It's 3/4. Then the next one is the half circle where they put the dot back in. So now you have two groups of three. That would be the 6/8. This is the notational system of the notes that I just described. The third one down is that it is the same symbol on its side as the fermata. Let's see, where is it? Right there. Fermata. And then this one here is the same symbol as our common time symbol that is still used today. The way that the fermata ended up being used from this system has to do with the ways that each one of these symbols were referred to. The circle with the dot was referred to as perfect meter, perfect prolation. Then the second symbol without the dot, circle without the dot, is perfect meter with imperfect prolation. And then you have the half circle with the dot, which is imperfect meter and perfect prolation. And then you have the last half circle with no dot, imperfect meter, imperfect prolation. So 3-3, 3-2, 2-3, 2-2.
Excellent. Thank you, Brett. I wanted to ask you about another aspect of numerology as it pertains to the lines and spaces of the staff.
Yes, you have 5 lines and 4 spaces, which is of course much more modern. It didn't start off that way. There was, of course, Guido came up with the first line, and it was red. Happened to be the representation of what was known as Fa.
Fa was presently the capital of our world, then, shall we say.
It was. Back in the time of Pythagoras, there was something called nature's tone. Nature's tone was what everything in nature vibrated. And Guido created this original red line. He wanted to have something that represented the starting point for nature's tone. This also goes back to numerology because C is the 3rd letter, which represents the idea of perfection. Guido was a Benedictine monk who was very interested in promoting the church. So there are a lot of things that are not only numerology, which probably came later because the order of the Benedictine monks were very well versed in, because 1,000 years ago this is exactly what the people would have understood to have been a science.
I think this goes back to the Greek. Why do I have the word ichthus?
Yes, the ichthus is the top of the treble clef, and the ichthus is the sign of the fish, which is also representative of the age of Pisces. There's 2 fish. The other one is at the bottom of what should have been a reverse image of the treble clef. Bass clef is not a reverse image of the treble clef because the treble clef cannot be a complete clef. It's an incomplete clef. It starts on line 4 and it curls around down and stops on line 2. Because a perfect fifth is an interval that has 7 half steps. 7 is also perfection, which is also complete. Just like there are 7 ages, there are 7 days of the week. There's 7 colors in the rainbow spectrum. And there's 7 letters in the musical alphabet. Religious text, there would be the 7 last words of Christ. And the number 9 is perfect perfection, which is 333, which is another reason why the sun sign that was used as the introduction for numerology and the first type of time signature would have been used, because it represents divinity.
I have a numerological sequence here having to do with, I don't know, does this sound familiar to you? The treble clef results in the number 37. That is to say, 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, and that if you're starting with counting the lines that the treble clef crosses and or at least touches as it goes around, it starts on line 2. You could actually do it this way. So 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and then it comes back around plus 5, and then plus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it makes the letter J and ends. The ball aligns perfectly with where C is.
Hmm.
And JC would give you the Jesu Christi.
What is the significance of the number 37? Where does that come from?
3 and 7 are both perfect numbers, and combined, 73 is also, the reverse of 37 in terms of numbers. These were known as God's numbers. Treble clef is a very unique clef in the sense that it not only contains that, but it also contains around the G line, or the line 2, which is where G is, which is the seventh letter. 7 plus 2 is 9. Also, as it comes up, you have the shape of the fish at the top part. It crosses on line 4. And this is significant because the fish represents what would have been the central symbol of Christianity. The word ichthus, ICHTHUS, is 7 letters. This is also an acronym. The shape of the fish is, interestingly enough, if it had a solid back on it, you could make a capital D out of this fish sign. And the fact that it also lands and crosses on line 4, which is D, and D is the fourth number, which is our fourth letter. D is the center of the 7 letters. You have ABC on one side and you have EFG on the other. So you have D in the center. As it comes back down, it crosses on line 4, on line 3, and on line 1. D, B, and E. That's 3 crosses. Would be representative of Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the crucifixion and all of that. And then, of course, it makes the J and then lands on C. This is one gigantic Christian symbol. It's fascinating to see all of the different curves and twists that it does. DBE is also a Latin acronym, De Bene Esse, which translates from Latin to English as for the good cause.
Well, it makes a whole more sense to make these historical decisions based not on just some sort of engineering feat, but to actually make it part of the Christian symbology in such a deep and abiding way that it serves as a whole system of notation.
Yes.
Did you mention that there are 7 clefs in all?
There are 7 clefs. There are three male voice types.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So 3 male voice types and 3 female.
3 female voice types, and then you have the third clef, which is the treble clef, which also indicates the number 3.
Right. Oh, I've got a little picture from our session, because there was another one of these, the three dots near the clef. Let me get it back. There it is. Better. You see the G clef?
Yes.
And the number 3 and the 2 dots.
Yes.
Why did I do that?
That has to do with the shape of the movable C clef. So when you see the alto clef placement and you see that it is on the 3rd line, you also see that with the alto clef or any of the movable C clefs, you have 2 lines and then a single curved line, which also is in the shape of the number 3.
One more thing I wanted to ask you from my notes, and it looks like this is rather complex.
Okay.
But it has to do with the notes of the keyboard. Notes of the keyboard. You see that 36 and 9 circled and 7 is circled. Do you see what I'm talking about? And then there are a bunch of designations. The number 2 means something. The number 1 means something. Number 7. Does it look?
And number 1 is the universe. 2 is mankind. 3 is perfection. 4 has to do with things like the seasons and the 4 elements. 5 represents the body, the human body, where you have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs. So there's 5 of those. You have 5 fingers on each hand, 5 toes on each foot. And in Christianity, there was the 5 places where Christ's body was pierced while he was on the cross.
Hmm.
6 is the one that I never can remember which one it is, but I know that it has to do with human failing.
Hmm. The frailty of the human spirit.
And then you have 7, which is another form of completion and perfection. 8 is change. 9 is perfect perfection. And and then you have combinations of numbers that will add up to either a 3, a 5, or a 7, or a 9. It's interesting that they're always the odd numbers are the ones that are the ones that we see most
Hmm.
in music. So, yep.
It actually portends way into our time, at least into the early 20th century,
Hmm.
because the number of keys on a piano uh,
Yes.
is 88, and
Mm,
8 plus 8 is 16, and 1 plus 6
is
is
7.
7. So
Yes. And it,
there's no mystery how we ended up with 88 keys. That's it's all there.
right, if you look at the history of the number of keys on keyboard instruments from the very beginning, they all will add up to either a 7 or a 9.
I've got 36 here as I guess one of the earliest keyboards that you were mentioning. Yeah, 36.
Hmm.
3 plus 6 is 9. So there we are.
Yes.
It's really just so amazing what you've unearthed. And I don't think this is a matter of needing any kind of evidentiary reinforcement. I mean, I think it's just the evidence of our own common sense, thanks to your brilliant innovation, Brad. I mean, it's really extraordinary what you've put together. And again, mind blown. I heard this one before, but mind blown. So thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. I discover new things all the time.
My oldest clock here in the house only chimes on the half hour and just chimes once, but it has somehow an amazing tendency. She's a brunette. I know her. I know her as Rebecca,
Mhm.
but she also has a rather uncanny way of chiming at punctuative moments. And like if I'm just about to sit down to play through the book two, or if I've just made some good connection, some light bulb moment, or as just happened now at the end of your Bach talk. So there you go. She chimes in only in the most important times. So we should all feel privileged,
I feel very privileged and honored.
as we are, by your scholarship and your generosity, Brett. Thank you for being with us on Bach Talk.
Thank you for having me.